I love that God can take care of the whole world. And I got the song in my head.
He's the whole world
in his hands. But that he wants us to partner with him on things. He invites us into a larger story. Yes, our story matters, but he's inviting us into more and more all of the time.
Please just hold your breath. Every door looks better when you keep it closed. Keep your head down and don't watch your step. No point in even trying now, just let it go. Maybe they will write this scene for me. Maybe this was really just a dream. Don't wanna take that risk and try to see. A 9 to 5 will bring security, I'm sure, but I can guarantee you that's no way to live. Way to live. Promise that's no way to live. Way to live.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Prodigal Peas in a Pod. My name is Denise Acosta.
And I'm Brooke Ackerman.
So today we are going to talk about the inception of stories.
Inception.
Yeah, story within stories within stories within stories. Mm-hmm. And more so our story, and then zooming out into the bigger picture, and then what happens when we do that. And when I say bigger picture, I mean God's story, God's will for overall humankind. And I'm over here freaking out about this thing on Tuesday kind of a thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, God, I need you to work and do all this. And God's trying to work on world peace. And so, yeah, how do we feel through all of that?
Yeah, but what I love about him, though, is it's not that this thing that you're all worked up about on a Tuesday, it's not that it's unimportant. It's not that it doesn't matter. I think this is one of those times where we apply how we think and operate, and we apply it to God, because we can only handle so much.
Yeah.
Whereas he actually can work on world peace and take care of your Tuesday problem all at the same time. No sweat, no problems. Doesn't need to take a nap afterwards. He's got it. But if we get hyper-focused on our little thing, then we have the problem. Mm-hmm. It's not that God can't handle it, and it's not that it's not important, but we make the smaller thing a much bigger thing than it actually is. And then that doesn't ever land us in a good spot.
See, that's where I go crazy, though, because it is a big deal.
It's a
big deal to God, too. Mm-hmm. So it is what you're talking about. It's the and, right? It's, yeah, God is working on all this thing, big picture for what needs to work out for when. And at the same time, my big thing on Tuesday, whatever that ends up being, right, is like you said, it still absolutely matters to him. But sometimes I definitely laugh at myself, right? Because you get so sucked into it. Mm-hmm. It's like you have that tunnel vision and you get so stressed out. And then if I zoom out for a little bit, when I start watching the news.
Oof, I don't like to watch the news.
I don't like to watch it either, but there's some things you just can't escape from.
Yes.
And then I start hearing all that and I'm like, so this thing on Tuesday doesn't matter. And I'll start going to that too, but
yeah, but false comparison isn't good either.
Yeah.
But my story is the most important every time, all the time, every day, every little thing. If we go to extremes, yeah, not great.
I am grateful to be in a place now where all of those things can exist at the same time, comfortably, for me logically.
Yeah.
Whereas not always.
Yes.
For sure. I have mentioned this before with my prayers before many years ago, and I'd be like, I only go to God for prayers like cancer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Only for things that big. And so then I hear about, I don't know, I have a cold or something. That's nothing compared to what this person's going through with this thing. And so the whole comparison, thief of joy that we've talked about before. But it's fascinating to me now that I can have something that consumes my entire being, mentally, physically, emotionally, whether it's positive or negative. And if I take a break and zoom out and I see what else is happening on the news, for example, or just even further from that and just what God's real big picture is, I just think it's so cool that, as ridiculous as it may sound to somebody else, that maybe I really wanted a bingo night on Tuesday. Like, that God would still care about that. And he doesn't look down on it like it's not important or not part of the overall picture. I also think it's just good for checking myself, right? Like when I'm getting caught up in stuff, I'm really busy and going through some things recently, and I check out of work for a little bit. And that was hard. The first week, I remember I was like really trying to get back, and I had to just be like, nope, we're still not there yet. We still can't do that. And so to know that I'm letting it sit, but then being like, but actually things are not going to fall apart. God very much cares about this ministry, and he will still work, but he also still wants me to recover with what I'm doing. Being able to experience all of those things has been so refreshing for me these last few weeks. It's not been easy to go through. Obviously, I'm feeling much better. I don't know that I'm at 100, but I'd say I'm in the 90s. I think I'm almost there. And so right now the temptation is to go ahead and start because I'm like almost there. But then I have to remind myself, like, we're not. Why don't we try getting to 100 for once?
For once.
And then go back and do stuff, right? And no, I've already kind of started doing other things. It's just like in me. Being this removed from, or being this recovered rather, I see things more clear, right? I can see like where I was, where I'm at today through this process, and my way of responding to things, the energy levels. And it is challenging to get out of what I was in to only focus on that and then completely leave the ministry stuff, right? Because that also matters. But knowing that God still has it regardless, and that what I was tending to or still tending to is just as important to him than any of the other things that I could have also been doing. As I'm going, what I think is the tail end of this finally, it is refreshing. It is refreshing to not have had that much weight on me throughout this whole time.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of weight that I put on myself, but it certainly not the magnitudes that I've done in the past. I think that's pretty incredible.
You said earlier in your life, it was different. And so are you aware of what the shift was so that you could hold both things, knowing that my story does matter, but it's not the only thing. God does care, but God can't take care of all. You know what I mean? What was the shift for you to come to that?
The root answer for that is exploring and learning more about who I was in Christ for real. The concept or mindset that I had about myself was very untrue. And so it was easy for me to believe my story definitely doesn't matter. Look what they're doing. That's far more important. They're making an impact, for example, and I'm just over here sad about something. So there's that would happen before. And it was so much easier to grasp onto those beliefs to where my story just doesn't matter. And so to learn more about who God actually is, his real character, and then what it means to be a child of God, and then who he has told me that I am, who I truly am, I'm confident in that as a daughter of the King, to know that it does matter. And I feel it. It's not just like,
nice thought.
Well, I read it somewhere, and so I think so.
Yeah, there's lived experience of it.
Yes.
Yeah. We've talked about this before, how it all comes down to who God is and who he says we are. And the more that we understand the real truth of that, the more that other things fall into place. Because that really is, that was it for me too, is really learning to believe that what God says about me is true. And it always amazes me, and I don't know if this is one of those things it's just never going to get old, and I'm okay with that. But I love that yes, God can take care of the whole world. And I got the song in my head. Got the whole world in his hands. But that he wants us to partner with him on things. He invites us into a larger story. Yes, our story matters, but he's inviting us into more and more all of the time. And I think it's interesting that you were saying you went to the side of nothing about my story is important, nothing about it matters. But then, because that's definitely helped along by the enemy, of course, because he always wants to distort our true identity. And so he'll take us to that extreme, or he'll take us so far the other side that kind of gets into the realm of arrogance, and my story is so important and I am so important that everyone and everything is beneath me. But it's just fascinating to me how often the enemy will go to extremes, and God's like, no, look at all the space in between that we get to play in and learn about. And so let me tell you all of these things about who I am and who you are. Whereas the enemy will often do things like always and never. Your story is terrible. Your story doesn't matter at all. And God would never say that. But in those times when the enemy does that, it feels true, sounds true. And the only way to come back from that is, God, what do you say is true? And that changes the whole perspective.
I can think of many years of my life where if there was an opportunity to serve or help somebody, I was jumping at it, right? And to my detriment, even if I'm like hanging on by a thread or nothing at that point, I'm like, because they need help, their story matters and mine doesn't. That was the ultimate belief. And then now, going into what you were talking about with the invitation, what an opportunity, right? So we have everything that we're going through. God's inviting us to his story. And whenever you were saying that, that came to mind was, it really, I don't know if it brings you back down to reality, or the words that I'm looking for, but it's a reminder that it's not always this big thing that needs to happen. And sometimes it's just the next step that we're doing is where we need to remain faithful. And that is how we're also just a part of that much larger picture that will have more impact long-term than, I don't know, some grand gesture.
It's making me think of how if you look through a camera and if you don't see the whole big picture, like if you're zoomed in real tight on something, that object looks really big. And it's not that that object's not important. It's just you don't have context for where it fits in the grand scheme of things. And so then when you zoom out and you realize that's just one object in this big landscape, again, all the pieces are necessary. They make up the whole picture. They all have a place, but it gets distorted, essentially. We can look at something and think that it doesn't matter at all, or we can look at it and it's the whole focal point when really it's just a part of the bigger picture. It's not that it's good or bad, right or wrong. It's just we need more context. And when God shows us the bigger picture, or he shows us our story within his story, it's not that it doesn't matter. What's coming to mind is when people will say things, and I know it's well-intentioned, but when people will say something about their life, and they'll say, first world problem, and sometimes I say it out loud, but my internal response is, well, we live in a first world. We do have first world problems because this is where God has decided that you are going to exist in his world. Now, if you're trying to go to somebody who has to walk 10 miles for clean water and tell them about how you were stuck in traffic in your really fancy car, it's not that their problem is not important or your problem is not important. It's just maybe it's more a question of sensitivity or awareness. It's not that something's good or bad or something's right or wrong. We all have our things and we can all make all of them really sound out of proportion. Now, don't get me wrong. I would much rather my problem be that I'm stuck in traffic than I have to walk 10 miles for clean water. I recognize the best that I can because I don't experience that on my day-to-day life. That is absolutely a problem. I'm not saying that it's not a concern, but what I'm saying is if we get too zoomed in on anything, we can blow it out of proportion. Because I've spent time with people who have to walk quite a distance to get clean water. I haven't spent months and years with them, but the people that I did spend time with who clean water was a real concern, if you ask them what their life is like, they have joy, they have connections,
So
they love God, they love their family, there's purpose in their life, you know what I mean? But could they get hyper-focused on something in their life and it get blown out of proportion? Yes. And we can do the same thing. It's a human condition. And so the false comparison doesn't help. It doesn't make anything any better. That's what's been rolling around in there for me.
I think the bigger picture, it's definitely a learned thing. It takes practice to start thinking that way.
Yeah.
And when you hear it, it just sounds obvious. Like, well, duh, when you say it that way. And I heard it said this one particular way, and it's just always stuck with me. I feel like I end up saying it a lot now, but we live our lives based on the truths that we believe. And these are the truths that we've picked up from our own personal experiences in life. But our experience is limited. It's not the full picture.
Yeah.
It's only one perspective out of this ginormous thing. And so there's a lot of different ways to take that. But like when you think about it that way, you start practicing that more often you implement that way of thinking more often, things maybe don't always make more sense, but maybe they can. It gives you a better opportunity to see maybe what else needs to get done, or I don't know, that maybe you're just wrong. There's so many different ways to take that mindset, but I think that's just so important, just recognizing and constantly reminding ourselves that this isn't just it, but not in a negative way, but that there is a ton more there, and let's get more of that information. Let's see what else we can figure out there. And so our story is what we're going through and the intensity of what we're feeling. But then if we think about that and we recognize that it's only a small little thing, there's all this other area, like you were saying, that we can play with. Let's go play.
I don't even remember who I first heard say this, but I use this phrase often. Your normal is not everybody's normal.
Yeah.
Because our perspective is the only perspective we have. And that's okay. You're not doing something wrong. That's your lived experience. But then be willing to recognize that you might be zoomed in really tight and allow for room to zoom out and see if there's more detail in the portrait. Magic eye. Did you ever play with those when you were a kid? Those books?
Oh my gosh. Those things used to frustrate me.
Why? Wait, hang on, just in case, because I don't know who our audience is. And some people might not know what Magic Eye is.
They were in the Scholastic book fairs, and they were like these dizzy looking pictures, and they were so cool. And everybody would be like, oh yeah, this one has a fish. And after a while, I just had to be like, oh yeah, I see it too. No, I didn't see it.
Really?
No, it's crazy.
Did you ever see anything in them?
No. And I had a friend's husband try to explain and almost teach me how I'm supposed to be looking at them. And that was only a couple of years ago, and that kind of made more sense. But I was starting to think, I was like, you know what? I wonder if it's because I have astigmatism. So I can't actually have a clear image and then zoom out and see it, because I have to refocus, or I don't have to, my eyeballs try to, but I don't know what's happening in there.
They're doing their own thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I just let them do what they do.
Interesting. Because, the reason I was thinking of it is because I remember when you first look at it, it just looks like a bunch of wavy lines, or it looks like a repeated pattern, and same idea. And I remember standing in the mall with my brother, and he's like, sort of let your eyes relax and kind of unfocus. And I was like, oh, okay. And so you just, like, when you start to stare into the middle distance, you're not focused on something right in front of you, but you're not gazing real far away. It's
like
just
looking
that
past it.
Yes. And as soon as I did, I was like, oh, there's a dolphin. It was clear as can be, and it looks 3D. It looks like it's jumping out of the water at you, and it's amazing. And so that's why I was thinking of it, is that we get so hyper-focused or hyper-fixated on something, and we need to just let our focus relax a little bit. And then we realize, oh, there's all these things out here in my peripheral vision that I was not seeing because I was so laser-focused on something. But that's interesting that you couldn't see them. I feel like more we could explore there, but maybe not.
Not as long as I have astigmatism. I know, like, when I would zoom out, I did initially start off as it felt negative, right? Because my story doesn't matter and there's more important things. And now it's just more of a relief. I'll be like, oh man, this big thing is going on. The more I zoom out and I see way more things, and I'm like, it's just one thing, and like,
yes,
this big soup happening, and my big thing is it's not going to be forever. This too shall pass. I'm like, it'll be all right. It's fine. Everyone's having a bad time.
Wow.
We're all in the same pot right now, and we're all going to get through it. Everybody's just trying to make it.
Great perspective. We're all having a bad time.
For things like that. Not always in general.
I do appreciate, though, that it's the idea of it's not all up to me. It's not all on me to make sure that something goes well or that things work out, because I definitely, for a time in my life, felt like that was true. And of course, that was helped along by the enemy. And that was before I really understood really who God is and who he says I am. And it was such a sense of relief and freedom to find out that, yes, I'm being invited into things. Yes, I'm part of the larger story. My story still matters. And it's not all on me to make sure that everything is staying on the right path, or yes, I have my choices, but I don't know. There was just this very tangible feeling of weight being lifted off of me, that this is something I was carrying that was never mine to carry in the first place. So I love that God invites us in, but at the same time, it's not all up to me.
Would you say that's the freedom found in Christ Jesus? I feel like I read that somewhere.
On a poster?
Maybe.
On a magic eye?
Definitely not the magic eye. I wasn't reading much of anything on those. But it was probably the Bible. That's definitely where I read it.
Okay, so I feel like there was probably more in the shift, what happened for you from not really seeing it clearly, your own story, and feeling like it was totally unimportant, to now how you see God, yourself, your story. I feel like there had to be more than what you said the first time.
Yeah, years for sure. There was definitely years that happened in that.
Buckle up, we're going to be here for a while. No.
In that one sentence. Kind of like the Bible skips centuries in a verse.
And it's like 300 years later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. And I think about my story often because I keep trying to add language to it. There's parts of it that I still don't have language for. Very appreciative of how I've moved along in it, but I would like to continue to add language because I think that would be more helpful to anybody else, really. So I've said this before and in previous episodes where my self-esteem was garbage. I wasn't just making up these things that I believed about myself. These are things that I had heard out loud expressed to me. And so I just believed that to be true. And you can say, well, God doesn't say that about you. So, believe otherwise and be happy kind of a thing. It's not a light switch either. Yeah, God's a good God. And so I'm sure he thinks I'm great.
He does.
But to somebody who's feeling that way and that's all they know, they can't wrap their heads around that God actually doesn't see them that way and actually didn't create them to be a failure or didn't create them to have an insignificant life or whatever, fill in the blank for whatever that is, right? And so I want to say that I've heard before people like, oh, look up what it means to be a child of God. What does God say? And yeah, that's helpful. I think that's nice to know and have those adjectives that you can start maybe thinking about yourself. But if you don't have that experience, you're not really gonna live out of that truth. You're still it's just something somebody told me. It's words on a piece of paper because I definitely didn't fully understand the context of the Bible. I certainly hadn't read the whole thing. And so it took a lot of years. It took a lot of unpacking conversations and trusting and just entertaining the fact that I entertained this for so long. Why don't we try entertaining this? Why don't we try it out? My whole story of being intentional with my faith came from me being like, let's give God a try. That's really what it came down to. And it's not just, show up to class one day. I was legit about it. I was going to for real try. And that meant classes. And that meant getting into a group. And that meant, even though I feel like I don't relate to people, to still stick around and see what happens. When it's that small little step, which is all he really ever asks for. And he's just completely blown that up. You could explain it a lot of different ways. We could say I got better vision from the Holy Spirit to start seeing more about how God was moving in my life. And so if he's moving that way, it's because he cares. Maybe it's somebody else that started, or not just one person, but many people that would start pouring into me. And I was feeling like I had value and worth because people are spending time and pouring into me. And so it was just a combination of a lot of things where I ended up experiencing it, which I could then move from. And so learning, if I starting to ask those deeper questions, more than saying, yeah, I trust God. Okay, trust God with what? Yeah, I believe God loves me. Do you though? Like, do you believe that he loves you in this moment? Start asking those kind of questions in specifics, because it's like the way that you're responding doesn't sound like somebody who believes that the God of the universe loves and cares about them. And so I guess having that language and thinking about it that way was probably a huge help for me too, in starting to shift my thought process on it. I think that's where it started. As more people came, more experiences, and I was able to start feeling that way.
You'll hear this episode back, but I wish I could somehow do it right now. Let you hear what you were saying right now in the middle of this, because you were talking about how at first when you started this out, you were talking about how you felt like you don't necessarily have all of the words for it. And then you started talking about experiences. And it's so fun because that's exactly how we learn things, is we experience first and then we have words for it. Because if you think about babies, when they're first born, they have no words. It's all experience. They know they're uncomfortable because they need to have their diaper changed, or they need food, or they need somebody to comfort them, but they don't have any other way. Mm-hmm. They don't have any way to communicate that other than crying. And that's a sound, but it's not language. It's not words. But then eventually they start forming words, and they realize the experience of when this person smiles at me because I say mama, then they connect that. This word means this person. And for a lot of our beginning of our life, that's how it works. And then something switches in elementary school, and we start getting a lot of words and a lot of thoughts for a whole lot of things, and we don't have experience for it. Because you can teach a kid what it looks like to scuba dive by giving them the list of equipment and how this works. But if that kid never goes into the water with scuba equipment on and does it, then they only know a fraction of it. And so when you were saying, people would say, read what God says about you, read what the Bible says. Yes, that is helpful. But then there has to come an experience, or it's only a part. It's not a full picture of what life with God is really. So it was just really fun to listen to you talk about how you didn't have words, but then you had this experience, and then you had more words, and then you had more experiences. And I was like, yes!
So I was just thinking about that a couple days ago because of everything going on. So you guys, my mom's been in and out of the hospital for the past month, I think, at this point, and it's been like really hard. And so we have this awesome meal train that's been coming to the house, and every single day we're getting food, and it's been amazing. I didn't realize how helpful that was going to be on a lot of different levels. But a lot of people are then asking, how are you? How's mom? And I don't know if I'm not used to really talking to people right now because it's just me and mom, and I'm taking care of her. There's not a lot of language outside of that.
Yeah.
But also I was just thinking a couple days ago, I don't have a full language for what all this is because I'm still in it. And so until it's over, then my thoughts and sentences will probably make more sense, because right now as I say it and I hear it, I'm like, that sounds like a mess of words, Denise. I don't know if they're going to get it, but they asked. I don't know. It's the best I can give you, to explain what's going on and how we're feeling.
Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking. I think it's because I'm not done with the experience. So until I get done, and then I can reflect back.
Yep.
And then me like loving writing, then I will have all the words, and then I can talk about it. And then we grow. Ding, next level.
Oh, geez.
There's so many different facets of that for my story. I do spend time thinking on that to figure that out, because I want to be able to help somebody else who felt that about themselves. Like it's really dark. And so to shift that kind of perspective, part of me is always thinking like finding the word. Let's find the words, because if we find the words, then we can help somebody else that was feeling that way. And I'm all on my feels on today's episode. That's a huge thing for me.
Yeah.
And so that's why I say that a lot. Like, I love language to things. Even though it's like an obvious statement, sometimes you just need to say it out loud.
Yeah.
Or hear it. And then it's, oh yeah, there's that puzzle piece. Now that makes sense. Okay, cool. And so now, because we know this and we understand this, now we can grow, or whatever needs to happen from there, or unpack or analyze and process whatever that is. But yeah, like shifting to letting God care about you and choosing to step out on that.
Are there things that you're aware of that used to feel like zoomed in, big, they felt big picture, but the more that you allowed God access to you, you realized those weren't quite so important? And not that they're not important necessarily. Okay, so for example, I know You might not like this example, but I'm using it anyway. I know a lot of people, and I like sports as well, but for a lot of people, sports gets a little blown out of proportion. If they miss watching the game, it's catastrophic. If they don't, do you know what I mean? If their team loses, you would think that they were on the sidelines playing the game when no, they were sitting in their living room watching
like
it.
They're losing their house with that one.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I cheer on my teams. I enjoy sports, but my life does not hinge on whether or not my team wins. And so I feel like that's an example. It's not bad to like sports. Don't come at me about this. I like sports too, but that is a smaller story. It's not unimportant. It's not bad. It's just your life does actually not hinge on whether or not your team wins. And so are there things like that in your life where they used to feel really big and really important, and then the more that God showed you the bigger story, those got put in their proper place?
I want to say definitely yes. I don't really know that maybe as I'm talking, I'll think of an actual example. But what came to mind as you were talking is when that happens, I feel like that's usually someone who is looking to find purpose in something.
Yeah.
And so if you don't already know what yours is, then that's when that kind of stuff happens. I was laughing at what you were saying because I think, was it this last football season, the Washington Commanders had a game during a typical Sunday morning during service.
Yep.
And
yeah, because it was in Europe somewhere, wasn't it? Yeah.
And church offered a super early service for it. And I'm like, that's funny. Haha, that's kind that they offered that. But I was business as usual. I came to church. I was going to class. And I remember one of my friends was like, oh, I'm surprised you're here. And I was like, why? And they're like, because the game. And I'm like, you guys, I love football and I love Washington, but it is just a game. We'll be all right. Be all right if I miss this one. This matters a little bit more to me. But yeah, I think the one thing that's sticking out to me right now, as far as an example, is at the time, it was huge. I was waiting to be sentenced for this felony, and it came with years of sentencing. And I didn't know how much I was going to get sentenced. I didn't know what the outcome would be. It was already a bad experience leading up to the sentencing. So I get sentenced, and gracefully a lot less time than, or at least that I had to serve was a lot less time than what I was ultimately sentenced with. And I just remember when I was talking to God, and again, this is a different conversation than something I would have today because my understanding is very different. It was very limited, and it was huge, right? This is a life-changing thing. It's a felony. This goes on your record. You have to tell everyone and their mom. Am I going to lose my job? They already denied my work release. Like, what's going to happen? My mom she had this trip already planned overseas with family, and I didn't want her to miss it. I'm starting my first days in there with nothing, no commissary. I have no way to get an undershirt. It's very cold in there. Some very basic things that you should have in there I wasn't able to get. And so this is where I'm at. This is my life, and this is what's happening. And this is going to change the trajectory of everything at this point. And so I just remember when I was talking to God, all I kept hearing, which is funny to say that now because I don't know that I would have phrased it that way back then that I heard from God, but I just knew that everything happens for a reason, right? And that,
Stop it.
And he was gonna use this later. And I knew that. And I was okay. And what am I gonna say? I'm not okay with it. God's gonna do what he's gonna do, right? Like, and you know what? Probably for whatever reason, there's still things I can grow from this. And there was plenty. But I remember saying that to God and knowing that, but I was still I still didn't like it. And in hindsight, oh my gosh, did he have a plan for that? You know what I mean? It's what I do now. It's what I spend a lot of time in that ministry. But it was so big. It was so big. And then to think that would actually one day just become a small story. No way. I couldn't wrap my mind around that. Yeah. There's what do you mean it's a small story? It's going to remember it forever. It's huge. It's a big stamp on me. There's no way it would ever not be big. And now it's a blurb. And it was hilarious at the conference when I'm talking to all these other people and they're like, oh, I was in for 25 some years. And I'm like, and mine's just peanuts compared to that, right? Compared to what they did. So I think that was probably the biggest that what was happening there had felt for me. it was so out of my control for things. My mind was, gosh, so many different things I was hearing, and not positive, that's for sure. And that this is just who I was going to be for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, it definitely becomes, we think it becomes identity, and then a tie to identity is purpose, like what you were saying before. And so at the time, there was no way for you to see it any other way than this is now felon. This is now who I am.
Yeah.
This is following me forever.
Yeah.
And that part of your story is true about you. Do you know what I mean? That happened. There's no erasing that. But what happens is it gets so zoomed in, it becomes so big that then we start to believe that it is the truest thing about us. It is true. It is part of your story, but it is not the truest thing about you. And yeah, it really just comes down again to identity and purpose, because I remember a friend of mine talking to me years ago, and she was saying something about how, because I was definitely hyper fixated on wanting to have kids, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to have kids. It was definitely, it's still a desire. I would still love to have kids. It's getting a little dicey now with my age, but whatever.
I'd love for you to have kids.
Hey, thanks. But I remember her saying, if we attach who we are to anything other than what God says about us, even if it's a good thing, like being a mom is a good thing. But she's like, eventually your kids leave. And then what is your purpose and what is your identity? You're married. Eventually, one of you is not going to be here. Then what does that mean about who you are? At the time, I was a public school teacher, and that was very much wrapped up in who I was. I took pride in that job. It was something I loved, and I was good at it. She's like, but then what if you eventually stop teaching? Lo and behold, I stopped teaching. And so that wasn't part of my identity anymore. And so what do I do with that? And so if we attach our identity to something that is not the truest thing about us, that's us we're looking for a story to be bigger than what it is. And it's, again, not unimportant. It's not that it didn't matter, but we've got to get it in its proper context.
And it's so temporary. In my example, right? At some point I was going to get out. At some point probation was going to be over. At some point 10 years would go by. We're 13 years later. And at some point all of this is going to happen. And I guess I just see it differently now, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it is a choice, the perspective that we take. And so now we know Denise's life story and even criminal record in the grand scheme of 100,000 different people just from the United States of America.
Yeah.
Like when you think about it that way, it's nothing. Let's zoom out of that. And you take that just into everything else. At some point that's temporary. At some point that's going to go. I was thinking about that yesterday, actually, kind of what you were saying. And the one thing that got pointed out to me once that it stays with me a lot, because it was the same question. If what you were known for went away, what would you feel like? How would you think? Where is your value after all that? But I always think about now is Jesus' baptism and how God said that this is my son with whom I am well pleased before any part of the ministry started.
Yeah. And nothing to do with what he was going to do or already had done. Yeah.
Because Jesus could have just not done it. But God was like, yeah, I love you. And so now with all these different things that I have going on, I love what I do for work. I love the different areas of ministry I get to do. It's so much fun, but that isn't me. That's not my identity.
Yeah.
And so it's helpful to think about those things, like those moments, and grown past it, or time passes by. And if we don't have our purpose, then yeah, we are going to cling on to just anything else.
Okay, so I don't want to mislead anyone, including the two of us. I feel like maybe accidentally we've been talking about as if our story and God's story are separate from each other, when really our story is a part of the larger story. Our story is part of God's story. And so knowing that, choosing that perspective, how does that change when difficult things come your way or when really great things come your way, knowing that your story is part of God's story? Does that change anything for you?
I think it removes a ton of pressure, a ton of having to figure things out or holding on to different emotions for different lengths of time. I was envisioning, a lot of movies have done this, but you have this one scene that they're on and they zoom out of the city, it's out of the, and it's like a whole globe, right? And it's, and all these different stories are going on too in this whole thing. And it's just fascinating. All these different things are happening at the same time. And not in the sense that it doesn't matter because look at this now large like outer space system and Earth or whatever. But I have found that it is a lot less pressure, because before it would be something I had to do on my own, and I would think of it as something different. And sometimes I would just forget about God's larger story about things, right? And so with this, doing it together, like recognizing that it is together and that they all do work together, I can just move in a way that doesn't feel detrimental. Like we've talked about before, like being afraid of doing the wrong thing. It's all right. And for what was happening in the last few weeks for me, that was super helpful, and it felt more at peace. I felt like I was able to I was like, yeah, this is really consuming me mentally, physically, emotionally. But I also know that 6 months from now, I'm going to be like out getting ice cream or something completely different. This isn't going to be on my mind. And this is just part of the story. What are we doing in this part right now?
Yes.
Can I stay faithful? And how does that look in this scenario? And so it's no longer, I need to do A, B, and C because in 5 years it needs to look like this.
Right.
And part of that is just life experience too. And I can plan all I want. And that doesn't necessarily mean that exact scenario is what God had in mind. All of this too is also life experience and being able to learn to let go of a lot of things. But I think the biggest thing that comes to mind for me would be that there's a lot less pressure in it, in remembering that and then just living out of that. Yeah. What about you, ma'am?
Similar with the feeling like there's not a whole lot of pressure. And I'm not saying that you're saying this, but for me, it feels like at first, when I first started to consider these things, it felt like either everything's on me or nothing's on me. Again, going to extremes when really that's not the case. Because while I'm not going to totally derail God's plans for the world and the big picture of human existence, my choices do matter. It's not a total abdication of responsibility. I have an effect on the people around me. And so to realize that I do have an effect. So if I'm having a really difficult time, how I handle my really difficult time, the ripple effects of that go out. Like it's not just affecting me, it has an effect on the people in my circle. And the same thing for good things, it has an effect. And so to realize that I have a level of responsibility to my own heart for my good, but then it also to know that it's because I have an effect on those around me. And so my small story matters, but my small story affects the larger story, and the larger story affects me. Does that make sense? It's
the ripple effects.
Yeah, it's all intertwined. It's not separate. It's not, for this difficult thing, I will move my small story out of the larger story just for a little bit so I can, no, that's not how that works. It's all intertwined all the time. And so it feels like that God's asking me to partner with him in his kingdom, and whatever choices I make, they matter and they have an effect, but I'm not going to blow everything up. It really often comes back down to me feeling like the little kid who gets to play, and my play has an effect. It's not childish, but it's childlike in the sense of, Dad's got this. I know if I knock over my sandcastle, it's okay because he'll come and help me make a new one. And it's just, I make choices, I have an effect, but he's always there, and that matters. I don't know if that really answers the question, but that's what I got.
But I like it. And I was thinking a cycle. And that's just how it happens. And it's constantly happening that way. And the next thing tomorrow, or even an hour from now, it's like, it'll be something. And then maybe it messes up, but God's going to come in and however we fix it to move on to the next thing. Or that was the plan. And so actually we were supposed to go here, but that's just always going to be a thing. And that has helped me a lot too in zooming out. I'm almost very quick to start zooming out now at this point in life, right? Because like, I don't want to be in a panic. Yeah. I don't want to be consumed with the anxiety. I did that for many years. I don't want to stay in that. And I've learned that's like, all that stuff is not really true and barely happens anyway, right? So let's be a little more realistic about things. What can we do? What is the reality of things? Yeah, sometimes you are going to fall on your face about things. Yeah. Sometimes, yeah, you did mess it up. But so what? We're learning from things, moving on to the next thing. That was all part of it because that's how you grow anyway. And so, yeah, stories. Stories.
Well, we hope you enjoyed our conversation today about big stories, little stories, stories in between stories, ripple effects, all the things. If you have any of your story that you'd like to share with us, we'd love to hear it.
We would.
And if not, that's okay too. And next time we'll be back with more fun stories because you know that we got lots of stories to tell, no matter what our topic is. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye. If you want to find out more information about Misfit of Creation, which is a soul food ministry, you can find me on all the socials, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. You can also find me on Etsy if you want to get some downloadable Bible studies or devotionals, and that's misfitofcreation.etsy.com. You can also find me on Patreon if you'd like to be a monthly supporter and using the same handle, Misfit of Creation. And I have an online Facebook community group that you can join, and you can find out about all the local events happening that I'd love for you to be a part of with me.
If you'd like more information about my coaching practice or read some helpful blogs or even schedule an appointment with me, you can visit blueprintheartandmind.com. And you can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
But wait, there's more.
Think I get it now. I need to be myself because a copycat can only do so well. In love with everything that makes me who I am. Don't need a backup plan. I hope they understand that I'm doing better today. I got me a mission that got some fruition. You down to stay out the way. Can't seek validation from people who hating. I got my mentality straight. Shout out to God, I've been keeping the first. He's been working and paving the way. And now I can guarantee you that's the way to live. Way to live. Promise that's the way to live. Way to live. Promise that's the way to live.
I don't know if I have all the language to unpack that, but we can
Great.
try because I feel like you have more language to add there.
I love how you always throw things to me like,
You have good language for things.
thanks.
I love your language.
I thank you.